Good evening and good morning. This presentation for the Oceans of Connections gives a synopsis of our work entitled A Cross-Cultural Examination of Mental Health Resilience During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Our team investigated peer-reviewed literature on the mental health challenges experienced during the unique situation of the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the factors for resilience that extend across different cultures. Our team consists of 8 students in 3 countries, and we collaborated to bring our knowledge and understanding of this timely and relevant subject amidst the growing global mental health crisis associated with this pandemic. From Amity University in Mumbai, India, Gayatri Singh and Pratiksha Prakash wrote the majority of our paper and contributed the body of work connecting the theories with our research. From the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, United States, Chandler Atkinson created a video that outlines and highlights the data about mental health challenges and cross-cultural resilience from our findings. Jax Johnson helped develop the topic, reviewed and distilled the literature on cross-cultural components of resilience, and helped editing. Leilani Polk contributed a beautiful illustration expressing the cross-cultural factors of resilience juxtaposed with the common challenges amongst people. Olivia Poulton contributed peer-reviewed annotations to further inform and strengthen our topic, hypothesis, and conclusions, and Zoe Knox contributed a poignant painting that signifies the importance of strong relationships between people, nature, and communities to support resilience in times of crisis. From Wuxi University in Fujian, China, Zoe Green contributed her experience in previous project with the earlier Oceans of Interconnections Symposium. The data from her project informed our findings and further strengthened our conclusions. When investigating studies on the mental health of communities during the pandemic, it becomes abundantly clear that risk factors for mental health disorders have been increasing across the world. Some of the realities common to all populations include fear of infection, social isolation, disconnection from healthy routines, uncertainty, resource scarcity, loss of income, changing social structures, and stress within families. From these rapid and radical changes, quality of life is affected in many ways, and heightened and prolonged stress has affected individuals' biology, psychology, and social and sociocultural health. People within minority groups and disenfranchised communities are especially at high risk for mental and emotional dysregulation and imbalance. It is well documented that symptoms associated with mental health disorders, such as anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress, are on the rise in many populations.
Researchers are now polling communities and looking for factors of resilience that buffer the negative mental health consequences of the pandemic. While investigating the literature, it becomes evident that certain mindsets, habits, practices, and environments have helped individuals and communities achieve growth in the face of extreme challenges. The focus of our paper is to provide real-world examples and solutions that are evident to work across cultures and geographies. And Leilani believed that the current bedrock of our lives is threatened by consistent themes, and the majority of the people in the world are enduring the same struggles. These stressors are common to human life, but the pandemic has increased the magnitude and the frequency of these disturbances. You can also see the illustration, the strong tiger of resilience has many stripes. There are creative factors such as music, art, and dance. Mindfulness practices help people assert their love and gratitude for life. In the home, cooking, playing, and learning together develop strong family connections, while kindness, compassion, and faith in the community support the larger social network. Most of the pandemic is how we experience grieving and loss within our families due to unique circumstances of deadly infectious disease. As Chandler Atkins outlines in this video, the lack of access to social rituals around grieving extends across cultures and has seriously impacted how people process loss.
During the pandemic, resilience outcomes were more common in people with certain behaviors. These outcomes looked like more well-being and less prolonged grief experiences during the pandemic. People who spent more time in nature found that they had better resilience outcomes. This was also true for people who practiced mindfulness meditation. And finally, people who had a positive outlook during the pandemic also found that they had a stronger resilience outcome during this time. One group, those who lost a family member during the pandemic, had different factors that played into whether or not they had a resilience outcome during this time. During the pandemic, the process of grieving after losing a loved one changed dramatically. This ended up ultimately impacting those grieving and changed their outcomes so that there were more roadblocks to achieving resilience. People are incredibly resilient. In normal times, 2/3 of people have a resilience outcome after trauma or grief. However, we've seen a significant shift. Those grieving the loss of a loved one have resilience outcomes that have dropped down to 1/3 during this time. One reason for the drop in resilience at this time has to do with lack of access to social rituals around grieving. All over the world, there are different social rituals that have been canceled or lost during this time. In the US, many of the grieving social rituals have been canceled, such as people's funerals, or at least moved to Zoom. Social touch and other social rituals have also been inaccessible and have made it hard to grieve in the way that our culture is accustomed to. In India, funerals were interrupted, as well as rites and rituals around funeral pyre lighting. In China, the ritual day of tomb sweeping was canceled due to the pandemic, and the 3-day ritual funeral process was often interrupted during this time. In Vietnam, the funeral and funeral procession are important parts of the grieving process that were often inaccessible to families during the pandemic. Other factors that led to a decline in resilience response for those grieving during the pandemic included complete separation for their loved ones on their dying days in the hospital. If they were even allowed to say goodbye, often it was only over a grainy screen. Those grieving were not able to escape thoughts of their loved ones as the news of COVID was everywhere around them all the time. And when the bereaved did want to talk about their loss, they found often it was not socially acceptable. The grief expert Kenneth Doga coined the term disenfranchised grief in 1989 to describe situations where people struggle to cope with losses that aren't socially sanctioned, openly acknowledged, or publicly mourned. For many, during COVID-19, their family members' deaths fall into this category and made it much more difficult for them to receive social support after the death. How to support those who have lost someone to the COVID-19 pandemic. Help them have positive memories of their loved one and remember positive anecdotes. So laughing and smiling amidst your tears leads to more resilient outcomes. Help them connect with others who've had similar experiences during the pandemic. Often this can be done through online environments. Help them find meaning and purpose after and through the death. Often this looks like supporting others who are dealing with similar things. And finally, allow people to talk about their grief and loss. Focus on emotions and the loss rather than on pandemic factors, which might be alienating for them. As the pandemic continues on, the number of people who have lost a loved one to COVID will continue to grow. Let's group together and help to make our communities, our cultures, and our world more resilient and happier during this time.
The most widespread and cross-cultural factors for resilience appear to hinge on healthy relationships. This is social connectedness that allows us to be supported and nourished at many levels, but it is also our relationship to ourselves and with nature. The people that have consistent nature experiences, healthy relationships with others, and practice consistent self-care and self-love have the most resilience and positive outcomes amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. This is illustrated in my painting, which summarizes our conclusions with this inquiry into mental health resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic. Experiences in nature offer restorative benefits to our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Redwoods have relatively shallow root systems for their immense height, so in order to stay upright and strong through storms, they grow close together with their root systems intertwined. If one tree starts to fall, the others around it can help support it as it heals. The stump with new plants and trees growing from it is a nod to the idea that death also gives life, and that loss and grief can give way to new and creative things. In cultivating a relationship to the natural world, we can find creative solutions for our own crises. The plants and animals with whom we share the earth lead by example. We can look to them for new and different ways of building resilience within ourselves and our communities.